Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Security Guy TV with your host, Chuck Harrell. My next guest is Mr. Joseph Degrassi. He's the Regional Director and Airport Practice Lead for one of my favorite companies, Genetec.com. Mr. Joseph, welcome to the show, my friend.
How you doing, Chuck? Appreciate you having me.
Good. Now, Regional Director, Airport Practice Lead, that's a big title to fill. Tell me what you do for them.
So, like many people here at Genetec, I wear quite a few hats. Over the last few years, I was actually the director of the Architect Engineering and Consulting program. And through that time, I worked with a lot of the industry's biggest consultants, and a lot of them focused on aviation. Before that, I actually worked at HID, the card and reader company, and actually made a few different kinds of readers and things specifically for airports. So I had a lot of background in it. And then just slowly started to take over more and more airport things. And about 3 years ago, I kind of took over the airport practice for the U.S. market at Genetec. I'm also the director of the public sector business for the West Coast.
What a coincidence, that's your background, because today's topic is identity management and airport badging. Now, it's funny you work for HID because I was using those ID cards back in the late 90s, if I remember. We might have been some of the earliest customers. And, that was the standard, the gold standard for badging. Let's talk about this challenge here. What are some of the issues at airports in identity management? It's got to be a daunting task.
It's a big task that they have to deal with. And honestly, airports every size, whether they be small or, the large CADX airports, they all deal with similar types of challenges. But one of the jokes I know a few consultants have even told me is, if you know one airport, that one airport. You don't know. They all are much, much different. But even that being said, when it comes to badging offices, they have a lot of challenges they have to deal with. And essentially, at the simplest form, it's I can't give you a badge until you've gone and we've done some kind of background check and vetted you and make sure that you should have that badge. Because, this badge may give you the privilege to go to a secure part of the airport or the facility relatively frictionlessly. So we want to make sure that if you're in that area, you still have, different checks and things, but if you're in that area that you've actually done some type of background check and been vetted and cleared by the FBI and, that you actually should have that badge to go to that location.
Now, are we talking about the TWIC card, Transportation Workers Identity Card? That's one identification. And then we also have separate ID, I suppose, for interdepartmental IDs, maybe one for this airline and that airline and so on.
Yep. So when you talk about TWIC, that was based off of old FIPS 201, I believe. Don't really know that market as much as I used to be honest. But TWIC, CAC, PIV, those are all kind of the same infrastructure that you would use for a card. Everyone thought that since the TSA was going to be kind of regulating, I believe, these TWIC cards, that it was going to become the standard in aviation. But in all honesty, they actually don't really use TWIC cards very often. They traditionally use just a standard normal HID card. And they actually go through a different type of background check and vetting process through either the AAAE or through Telos, but one of the clearing houses to actually validate the person should get that card. So it's a little bit different. I know a few years back, everybody thought they was going to go towards TWIC and everyone that worked in an airport would be using these transportation workers identification credentials, but they actually now have just a traditional HID card. And that's where it gets kind of unique, though, is if I'm giving you one of these cards and I'm going to have one of these badges attached to an individual, we have to be worried about, expiration date. We have to make sure that that individual has been cleared by the FBI, maybe use it on a fly list. We also have to make sure that they've gone through and done certain types of trainings and been cleared to do those types of things. And then after we issue that card to that individual, we also need to make sure that they still haven't done anything wrong. So let's say a year from now, they issue me a badge and I go do something in another state that maybe would disqualify me from having that badge. That's a process they call wrap back, but essentially the system needs to continuously validate that Joe Degrassi should still have this badge. And that's something actually one of our systems can help with, but it is a regulation that the airports have to abide by. But yeah, a little different process than your traditional TWIC cards, which actually had a really, really significant vetting process. And they were doing PKI and things like that at the door. We haven't really seen that trend in airports, actually.
Well, you hit on a very interesting point, and I learned this, in 1996, we started issuing ID cards at the studios. the technology part was fairly simple. I can make the card, I can put the card in the database, I can make it work at the reader. It's not about that. It's about the data management. It's about making sure that that guy's access control is valid right now, this second. And this is the challenge. What are some of the compliance regulations that airports need to be aware of in connection with this? Now, I remember when I had my TWIC card and I had TWIC cards for my employees, I had to kind of vet my own database. There wasn't a TWIC database that kept track of all this stuff. That was up to the people that had them issued for their employees. What's going on with this in the area of regulation?
So, when it comes to regulation in airports, they all have to have some type of system that is actually validating off of what they call the DAC. The DAC is the Designation Aviation Chandler. There's two essential groups that actually kind of help us manage the DAC, and one of them is the AAAE. And under AAAE, they have TSC, the Transportation Security Clearinghouse. And then there's another private organization called Telos. And essentially, the TSA requires that when we're issuing a CETA badge or an AOA badge or any of these types of badges, they have to be cleared by one of these clearinghouses. And those clearinghouses manage things like the FBI databases, the security no-fly list, things like that, and it ensures that this individual should have that badge. Once they have that badge, we also have to make sure we get their biometric information. So if you did TWIC, it'd probably be a very similar process, except the database is all managed at the airport. So we come in, we fill out some paperwork. Maybe that's an I-9 form, whatever it may be. So we got to make sure we collect that information and maintain it. There's different types of payments and things like that they have to worry about. But if I'm an employee, I need to go in, I need to make sure that, I'm trying to get my badge. And then I would have someone that works for a company. So let's say it's an airline that's a contractor with the airport. They typically call that person an authorized signatory. And that person wants to know that as Joe's going through the process that, I'm getting my badge and where I sit and how long it's taking and if I'm cleared, if I'm denied, where I am in the process. I also need to know all kinds of other things that we can talk about here in a few minutes, but that's a concept of that authorized signatory. And then I have the employee going in. Then through the process, I talk about their biometric information. We have to take that. We have to take your passport, your driver's license, and then a bunch of other information, forms and things. And then we have to submit that to the clearinghouses. And then it could take a little bit of time. It could take a few days. It could take a few hours, whatever it may take to actually get the response back. And once the response comes back, we have to, based off of either state or federal regulations, determine if that individual is cleared to get this badge. And then before we issue the badge, did they go through training and things like that we also require before they get that badge? So there's lots of different requirements that go through this whole process. But the truth is the TSA could just show up at the airport and say, hey, we're going to do a 5% audit today, or we're going to do an audit of just a few cardholders or whatever it is. I want to make sure that we don't have a certain amount of lost badges too, because if they lose over, I believe it's 5% of their badges of one of these subcategories of, let's say, CETA badges, they have to rebadge that entire population. And there's all kinds of fines and infractions and things that can happen if they're not compliant with what the TSA is kind of mandating them do. So it's actually a pretty difficult process, to be honest.
It sounds difficult, and 5% is too generous. I'd make it, 0%. That's what I would do. Now, let me ask you this.
Well, and actually to that point, so if let's say I'm a contractor for the airport, and I have Joe Degrassi being the authorized signatory, I need to know if I have somebody that that quit or their badge expired or whatever, that they didn't actually return the badge. And then the airport wants to make sure that me as the authorized signatory goes and gets those badges, because it could end up being a really complicated process for the airport if we don't return them. And then they also want the system to be able to notify, well, it never got returned, so we need to now charge that contractor a fine to make sure they don't do it again and correct that behavior. But the system kind of has to manage this whole process. And that's where we start talking about, full-flown identity management.
Now, I like what I'm hearing in one sense, because when I had my TWIC card, I could go to Burbank or LAX, and that TWIC card worked in those environments,
Yep.
right? What you're telling me now is we've come back to, LAX has its system and its cards, and we're not going to cross that with Burbank. Got to have a separate system. Is that right?
Yeah, unless the two systems were connected. I know LAX and Burbank kind of, I actually don't know enough about the two of them to tell you a true statement, but I know that they were owned by the same authority at one point, and I know like Ontario was owned by the same authority, so maybe. But the idea is, yes, when you have one of those badges for LAX or whatever XYZ airport, that is good for that airport. And it's for that category. So whether it be a CETA, an AOA badge, or maybe a public-facing badge, and then whatever categories underneath those, they need to have a different type of template, a different color code, all of those things. And then the process kind of comes through too. Let's say, Joe is cleared and I'm in a secure area of the airport, and in my color of the badge is supposed to be green, and it's supposed to have a certain format. And this means that I've gone through and I've been cleared by the clearing houses, and I'm there. I have to have my expiration date written on the badge. Technically, if somebody sees me walking in that area and I don't have that color and that, my expiration date's wrong, they're supposed to stop you and tell you, hey, what are you doing back here? And when I go through those areas, they're going to validate it and see and say, oh, it's expired, or oh, this is the wrong color, or whatever it is. So yes, you would not be able to use a LAX badge at, let's say, Florida, let's say Miami or something like that. That badge would be for that airport. And then it's the responsibility of that airport to also manage that identity to ensure that that individual has been cleared and should be able to actually still have that badge and have the rights and the privileges around it. So it's actually a pretty complicated kind of process, but it is owned by the airport to manage themselves.
Well, it is complicated, and people throw a lot of words around compliance. We have some policies, we have programs, all these words we use in security. I could see somebody making this work at LAX. Be a lot of due diligence there. I mean, you'd really have to stay on it to make it work smoothly and practically. However, here's what happens. The key word people forget to use, sustainability. Can we sustain this level of perfection for this? And that's really the trick. Tell me what the solution might be if we're trying to solve sustainability, because I think that's the key to data management here.
Yeah. So, and I'll actually kind of dovetail that into kind of another, I guess, kind of response. But if we look at airports, traditionally companies that kind of help the process of identity management build a lot of customization for those specific airports. And there's a few that have, promised to be able to do all of these grandiose things, and then they build these custom integrations and things. But then the problem is this: the system tends to have problems because other systems get upgraded, other systems change, other systems, all of a sudden the data gets as it gets updated is no longer sending between the two parties. There's a lot of complexities that adds. So, at Genetec, what we've been trying to do is create a solution that was built more around an out-of-the-box solution for small to medium airports. It's not full-blown identity management, not all this customization and cool, unique features and things like that. It was built really to help manage that badging process and be a smooth, seamless, out-of-the-box solution that still helps with operations and still helps them do more with less. But it's a little more of a streamlined solution that's not so customized, so the system doesn't have to have so many complexities and possibilities for challenges down the road. The other thing is, we have to ensure that the database is very, very secure. I mean, if we're taking people's information, that's, their social security number, where they've lived, their driver's license, their passport, their biometric information, and then we're, storing that in a secure facility or secure, spot, that when that data is transferred up to one of the clearing houses, that it's done in a secure way, so we don't have to worry about man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. So those are all the kind of things we have to deal with, and make sure that that data is secure, and that data is in a facility or a spot that also can't be, accessed very easily. And then as that data is being transferred between multiple systems, that it's been done in also a very secure way. But when you talk about it, and maybe sustainability, I didn't necessarily answer it in the way you were looking, but the goals that we have is, let's build something that is a rock solid, out of the box solution that doesn't require a lot of customization. So therefore, there's a lot less of a chance of it breaking down.
I think you nailed the question, because that's how you sustain it, because it's simple, it works.
Yeah.
And Genetec is probably a couple months away from being put in the Smithsonian. People don't know this. You're a legacy company. You guys have been doing this a long, long time in the, let's put it, the world of the Internet of Things. You guys have been around a long time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies too. So I mean, it's not, when we're talking about badging, we're not the only ones who are doing this, and we have some really wonderful partners that make great solutions. Dave Peoples' company over at IntelliSoft, awesome stuff. HID Safe, these are great solutions. what we've been trying to do is focus on a little more of that target market that, other companies maybe aren't as much, which are the small to medium airports. And again, building that not so customized, just more of an out of the box tailored solution to help them improve their operations. But yeah, as you say, we're a company that's been around a long time. Interestingly enough, this is a brand new solution. And, I believe one of the things that's helped us continue to grow is instead of, on the development side, I almost joke, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but the Field of Dreams principle, which is if you build it, they will come. We try not to do that so much. We're actually building this product with a big airport that had a problem, and then we're also trying to build this around their needs and their operations to make sure it fits. But rather than just building something because we thought you needed it, we actually build it in conjunction and parallel with our customers. I think has actually helped us a lot with our success.
Well, it has, and you guys have been doing that a long time as well. And I've always asked this during all my Black Hat interviews and cyber stuff going back 7 or 8 years. What about Joe the plumber? What about that smaller mid-sized guy? Why is nobody taking care of him? Because if I can get to Joe the plumber, I can get to the Disney studio because he's a vendor, right? I'm glad to see companies are focusing on this now. This really is the solution.
To that point, the small to medium airports right now, they're doing a lot of this stuff with paper. And it's on them to literally have, I have files over here. I'm one of those guys that literally has a file cabinet, but, I can lean over and grab it. And then they have these paper files for all of the individuals and all the identities and all the information around all the personnel that are getting badges at an airport. And then when they try to connect with, these systems in the DAC and doing this stuff, they have other third-party systems. And it's a very manual, laborious process to go through and do all this stuff. They have the same regulations that, a bigger airport has to apply to, but they really don't have the funding to be able to spend on a really complex identity management, which is another reason. So the product we have coming out, it's going to be called Airport Badging Solutions, but it's really meant to just be something to help them in their badging office, to get rid of the paper, to automate these processes. And our target market, our focus specifically is that small to medium airport space. Not to say we won't eventually try to, get to the big space, but really, our goal is to try to create something, and we actually have been doing it and it's working, to help those small to medium airports with the problems that we're all facing today in aviation.
Well, if you solve the small airport, you're actually protecting the larger airport, aren't you? Because the smaller airports feed the
I
larger
would say
airports.
so.
I mean, yeah, that's how it works. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I've always liked about Genetec is I'm going to date myself, the GUI, the graphic user interface. I'm not sure we even use that term anymore, but back in the day, most people couldn't connect to my places at the studios because there's proprietary BIOS. And it was all, you know what? Genetec could always plug and play on almost anything. And I think this is really important. How easy is it to use the interface? I know the interface itself is simpler, right? I get that part, but we're kind of getting to a point where we have a shortage of people that get the Internet of Things. We don't have a lot of high-tech people. Maybe it's a guard. Can we get that guard up and running very quickly on these things? Because that's probably the person that's going to have to use it, after the IT guy sets it up.
That's exactly it. So our solution, we really tried to make sure it's the same GUI that people are used to using. If you know how to use Synergis or access control, you know how to use our video, any part of Security Center, it's the same look and feel. The reporting engine that we've built, the reports are a big, big thing that the airports have to worry about for a variety of different reasons that, of course, we can always go down into that if you wanted. But the reporting engine is the exact same engine that we're using with Security Center. So if you know how to run a report in Synergis, you're going to know how to run a report in the badging solution. So if we're trying to do, more with less, ensure that, the operators don't need to worry about getting trained on all these different things, it's the same look and feel, the same GUI that they're used to using every day. The only difference is now there's a new task that appears that has airport badging. And then when you click that, the cool thing is it actually allows you to do things like pre-registration of an employee or a contractor, or even, the companies and things like that will be working with you. You actually be able to pre-register them, and then they kind of sit at this management layer. On a GUI perspective, it looks the same, but within that task, we allow this management layer that sits up here that does all the identity stuff and background checks and retaining of the database and all of that. And when someone's clear, then it pushes them down to the access control system. Traditional access control systems do what you expect. We're letting you get through a door. We're, being able to run reports, and, in airports, you were able to enter a code at the gate, to make sure that gate agent enters it, and then it overrides the door for a certain period of time, whether either deboarding or, letting passengers get on the plane. Those are traditional access control system things. Our system, again, it sits over the top. It's that management layer, but the beauty is what you touched on. It is that same GUI that you're used to using day to day, which really, again, lowers that complexity. And what we're trying to do is, again, simplify the life of that small to medium airport, so they can do more with less.
Fair enough, my friend. Joseph Degrassi, we're talking about identity management and airport badging from the regional director and airport practice lead for one of my favorite companies, Genetec.com. Mr. Joseph, thank you so much. This is very, very eye-opening, and I feel a little better. Every time I do a show, I kind of go, oh, I don't feel so good, that my stomach hurts, or I feel, hey, I feel great. I'm giving you the I feel great ending here because I think you guys have some solutions here that are really going to start helping a lot of people. Thanks so much for coming on the show, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you.